when it comes to Matisse Thybulle and Tyrese Maxey being involved in a return for James Harden, what do you make of that even suggestion that's out there in the the reporting world?
Well, I definitely don't blame the Nets for shooting for the stars and trying to get whatever they could get. I know, from a direct team source that Tyrese Maxey is basically just off the table at this point right now. They're not interested in parting with him, which, understandably so after how he's emerged this year. He's looked, great, still only 21 years old, obviously still on that rookie contract. And, I think really just starting to kind of scratch the surface of how good he could be. So, at this point, he's off the table. Matisse is a guy that, obviously they really don't want to have to part with, especially with, obviously Ben not being part of the lineup. Matisse has been there. Obviously, their number one perimeter defender. Their lockdown guy that they put on, another team's best player every night. So they do not want to give up Matisse at all. If it came down to it and he was the sticking point between them landing James Harden or not, I do think they would, be inclined to make that move. But, that's one of the things right now that's kind of holding a deal up from potentially happening is, how much would the Sixers include in addition to Ben Simmons?
I'm not about to say that Andre Drummond is going to be a guy that's going to hold up any deal for James Harden, but the Sixers literally have no rebounding right now as it is. What do you make of him being thrown into the mix as well as some are reporting?
Yeah, I was more surprised about the Nets potentially having interest in Andre Drummond. Not that they couldn't use him, but it just kind of, seemed like a random guy to throw in there. I do think if that was something that would help get the deal done, the Sixers could probably find another, not as, Andre's been great behind Joel, but the best backup he's had in his career so far. We said that about Dwight Howard last season. Andre's been even better in that role for the Sixers this season. So it would be a loss, but I think, either between the buyout market or another trade, if, that went through when Andre was gone, they could pick up, another big guy that could provide some of the same production. And obviously he's not the type of player that, would prevent a deal from happening if that is what Brooklyn actually wanted.
I'm going to ask you the toughest question here, and I really do think this is the toughest one when it comes to Daryl Morey balancing trying to win right now and this year and not wasting this opportunity with Joel Embiid, and Daryl Morey also realizing he could possibly get James Harden in the offseason and not have to trade a lot for him. Not have to trade anything for him, just sign him. So how do you balance that? If you're next to Daryl Morey, how are you balancing that?
Yeah, that's I think the biggest thing with the Sixers right now, from what I've been told with the front office, is they really think they have a legitimate chance of landing James Harden outright this summer when he hits free agency. And if that's your thought, how much would you really be wanting to give up to get him for the rest of this season? But like you said, if they did add him for the rest of this season, you're talking about with him and Joel in an Eastern Conference that's pretty wide open. Mm-hmm. You would think they would have a really legitimate shot to make a run at a title, which is, obviously the ultimate goal of Morey and the rest of the front office. So I do think, like I said, it's a situation where they'd be willing to include some compensation, whether it was, maybe a Matisse, maybe Seth Curry or an Andre Drummond, Danny Green, probably a first-round pick or two to get the deal done. I think they just draw the bar at Tyrese Maxey because they look at that as a guy like, yeah, we would like to increase our title odds this year, but losing him would be detrimental long-term. I mean, James Harden's already 33 years old. Clearly, he's still very good, has a lot of basketball left in him, but not the guy that he was when he was, 25, 26, 27 in Houston, putting up, those MVP numbers. He's clearly on the kind of the downslant of his career. So I think the Sixers see Maxey as a guy that, they can build with and could take a lot of pressure off Joel as he continues to develop his game. So, I think anything's probably on the table, and except up to Tyrese is where they're like, nah, you know what? We don't want to do that.
I also saw Patty Mills' name out there possibly being involved in a deal for the Sixers and James Harden, part of a package there in return from the Nets. Patty Mills have enough left in the tank to help the Sixers down the stretch as well?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I think he could provide a similar thing to kind of what Seth Curry does, probably not quite as prolific, but he's a great off-ball, guy to have around star players. When you have Joel, and if you get James too, obviously you want to give them as much space as possible. And Patty Mills is still a guy that defenses have to respect. He still can, knock it down from long range at a long clip. So that would be, if that was a thing that came through, that'd be a nice throw-in for the Sixers to kind of help offset some of the losses that they would probably incur in the trade.
With the idea that you think you could get him in the offseason. Look, I know there's tampering and I know that all that other stuff exists, but like James Harden, I think knows Daryl Morey pretty well, and I think Daryl Morey knows James Harden pretty well. So the hunch that James Harden might be available in the offseason either way, I think is a good one to go on. So with that being said, if you're Daryl Morey and you want to get him right now, is Green and Simmons, do you think that's enough of a fair deal to get James Harden back? Would it be something along those lines? What do you think is the fair deal, realistic deal that would be on the table right now?
I think that would be fair if you threw in some draft compensation along with it. Danny Green's a guy, a veteran guy that they could bring in, fill in immediately, would help them on the perimeter defensively where Brooklyn struggles, would help space the floor around, obviously, Durant and Kyrie and Ben if he's there. And then, the Nets obviously have the better player out of the two in Harden. So I think they would want, whether it's Philadelphia's first-round pick in the upcoming 2022 draft, a future compensation. But if it's a situation where the Nets decide they want to pull the trigger for fear of losing him for nothing outright over the offseason, which I think is a legit fear. He could have signed an extension with them last offseason. He decided not to. That kind of flew under the radar a little bit until obviously they hit these choppy waters, and now it's a big talking point. So I think where there's smoke, there's fire, and there really is a chance he leaves Brooklyn over the offseason. And at that point, why not maybe just get something back for him, like a young guy in Ben, a couple like a veteran and Danny, and some draft picks that you could either use or flip for, more help around those guys in another deal.
Do you think this deal gets done by the deadline? Do you think James Harden will be traded for Ben Simmons by the deadline?
I don't. It would be exciting, obviously, and fun, and it would add a whole level of intrigue for the rest of the season. But I just feel like there's too much to, the two sides have their own thoughts of why this might or shouldn't happen. I think the Nets think they still have a really legitimate shot to win the title this year once Durant gets back and is healthy and Harden's healthy and Kyrie's, even if he's still part-time. I think if they think they have those three, they have a shot. And the Sixers are looking at it, like we said, like, hey, if we think we could land him in a few months, why are we going to give you A, B, and C instead of just waiting, keeping those guys and then adding him for nothing?